Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar on navigating the world of AI in education. This experience is co-sponsored by the College of Education and Human Ecology and the college's Alumni Society Board of Governors. My name is David Grimes. I'm a proud alum of the college and member of the board, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. We have an exciting panel lined up featuring OSU experts who are at the forefront of integrating AI in education while promoting equity and innovative technology and teaching practices. So I'd love to introduce our distinguished panelists first. So first up is Dr. Peter Sayer. He is a professor in the EHE Department of Teaching and Learning. His area is in multilingual language education and applied linguistics. He designed and taught the department's first course on AI for educators and has led workshops for K through 12 teachers and higher education instructors. His recent research analyzes the implicit linguistic ideologies embedded in various popular chatbots. How cool is that? All right, our next panelist is Casey Reinhardt. She is the Director of Distance Education and Learning Design and a semester lecturer in the College of Education and Human Ecology. In addition to her role, she co-leads the AI and education community within the college, driving forward-thinking initiatives and fostering a collaborative environment for exploring the applications of AI in education. Thank you for being with us today, Casey. All right, our final panelist is Dr. Rick Voigthofer. He's an associate professor in the Learning Technologies program in the Department of Educational Studies. He coordinates the online Masters of Learning Technologies program and focuses his research on the intersections of technology, learning, and equity. Dr. Voigthofer's work aims to bridge gaps and create inclusive learning environments using advanced technological tools. And before I introduce our lead moderator today, I just want to do a little couple housekeeping rules. First is if you signed up for the certificate today, just make sure you stay on to the very end of the hour, and we will email you your certificate at the end of the week today. And if you're thinking, hey, I want a certificate, you can definitely reach out and still get that certificate. So if you want to reach out to Carrie Dixon, and Carrie's going to put the email into the chat. And if you email Carrie into the chat, it's going to be dixon.480@osu.edu. You can email her here anytime in the webinar, and she will make sure you get on the list to get your certificate. So I want to make sure you do that. And if you have any questions too, you can locate the chat and send off a chat message or comment or question to us, and we'll make sure to get to your question if we have the time sprinkled all throughout the webinar. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Deetra Price-Dennis. She is the Executive Director of the Center for Digital Learning and Innovation and a Professor of Teaching and Learning at The Ohio State University's College of Education and Human Ecology. Her award-winning scholarship utilizes ethnographic and sociocultural lenses to explore critical literature education, learning technologies, and equity-based curriculum development in K through 8 classrooms. Dr. Price-Dennis's extensive experience and deep commitment to equity make her the perfect guide for today's conversation. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Price-Dennis to kick off our panel discussion. Deetra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, David, and welcome everybody for being here and joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us. We are in for a treat with this incredible panel. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to just give you a brief overview of our webinar. Our plan is to address 4 broad topics that help us think generatively about AI in education. We'll begin with a brief overview and then pivot to a conversation about how to address the role of AI in enhancing efficacy or efficiency and productivity in teaching, learning, and admin tasks. Then we will shift to thinking about challenges and ethical concerns, and we'll round out thinking about the role of AI in curriculum teaching and instruction for K-12 education and also higher education. And as David mentioned, we invite you to please raise as many questions as you can think of in the chat. We only have an hour together, so we will not get to all of them, but we definitely will use your questions to inform future programming. So please generously share your questions and ideas. All right, so without further ado, we are going to get started. I want to just give us a moment to think about the way that in the era we are in right now with technology, how AI has such potential to reshape our lives, and we're seeing it every single day. So I think that this is a great time, Peter, perhaps for you to kick us off with the basics. What is AI and why is it so crucial for us to explore its potential within the educational landscape?
Great. Thank you, Dietrich. You're hearing me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Great. Good. Thank you, Dietrich. And thank you, David, as well, for including me on the panel. So yeah, we're going to just start with a quick overview. So we're kind of on the same page as far as how how generative AI works. I think one thing to recognize is when we start with is that we already interact with AI in a lot of different ways in our everyday lives. So, if you use Siri or Alexa, or even, when you're on Netflix or YouTube and you're getting these suggestions for content to watch. These are based on algorithms that look at the patterns of your using those platforms and then suggesting, kind of predicting what it thinks you will like next. So, we're already using AIs in lots of different ways. I think what's really different about generative AI, and what was really a game changer when like ChatGPT came out early last year, and suddenly we had this really kind of open, a very intuitive but kind of open sandbox tool that people could use for, pretty much whatever purpose they wanted to. So I think that was kind of the aha moment when we realized that that AI is really here. Although it's been, as I said, it's been here for a while. But generative AI, I think, is different than some of these other platforms, and particularly because it has what's called deep learning, or what we would really call thinking. Right? It's cognition that really seems to be very much, for us at least, seems like it's kind of mimicking human thinking and understanding. That is to say, it gives dynamic responses to human input. And so, when we say Chat GPT or Copilot, Perplexity, these are, different chatbots, and chatbots and generative AIs is the same thing, right? And that these are different products from different companies that are essentially different chatbots. And now you see that they'll generate text as well as images, the text to image generators, and even, musics and videos. This thing we're worrying about with deep fakes now. You've heard in the news a lot about these deep fakes. I know, Casey, you're going to be talking about some of the ethical and other issues that come up with this. I know for me, it was kind of, when I saw that the Pope in the puffy jacket, if you remember that went viral last year, we're just kind of realizing, holy cow, this is a fake picture, right? But so I think, and we've heard of cases now, particularly in schools, where a student might create a deep fake of another student smoking pot or something like that to try to get them in trouble. So again, this is these sorts of problems that we're going to have to be grappling with here. But the way it works, though, is it's actually a fairly straightforward thing, although it's highly complex but fairly simple at the same time. And what I mean by that is that generative AIs have essentially what's their brains, and you'll hear this term large language model, or LLM. And the way it works is what they call a next word predictor. And again, that's pretty simple. All it's trying to do is figure out, okay, these are the words that have come up, and this is the word that's going to come next. And it does this because when we say large language model, large is like an understatement. This is like billions and billions of what we call co-occurrences, billions and billions of words or pieces of data that form these patterns. And it's able to see these patterns and use that to figure out what's going to come next. So like a really overly simplified explanation of this is that if I have a series of words here, Mary had a little, then we can kind of think about, okay, we know what's going to come next, right? Mary had a little lamb, period. Or maybe Mary had a little lamb, comma, its fleece was white as snow. But we know that that's kind of, we can kind of predict that that's what's going to come next. And so what it's doing there is then, again, it's looking across its large language model, which is its giant data set, that it's brain. It finds the patterns, and then it figures out what's going to come next. And so these are like probabilities, right? And so this is probably what's going to come next. Although, other things could come up. It's not probable, but it's not impossible. It could come up with something, totally different, right? And so it figures out, what are the probability, what am I asking for? And when I say what am I asking for, it's looking at what is the input that I give it and what output is it going to match, right? Kind of trying to figure out what I'm looking for. So again, according to what prompt I give it, it adjusts those probability, and that generates a new output by, again, stringing these things together, right? And so when we're saying that generative AI is learning, each time we do this, each time we interact with this, it's actually getting better at it, right? And so it's learning by, again, figuring out these patterns in order to generate the next word. But then each time I give it a task, if I ask it to write a lesson plan for me, and then I regenerate and kind of tweak it, it's also figuring out how do you do that task, and figuring out how does it align the task to what I want, my preferences, right? And so again, it's evolving and learning as it goes. And so each iteration of ChatGPT, for example, is essentially getting smarter, and they're showing that it's getting smarter. I don't know if it's exponential, but it's getting a lot smarter really fast, right? And so when it does this, so this is an example, I teach an undergraduate class here for our education majors on second language acquisition. So I can ask it to create a lesson plan for me. You're giving me PowerPoint slides on this topic in second language acquisition. And so when it generates this for me, it's actually doing it, I might have Googled this back in the day, right? And so, but when I'm Googling it, previously when I Googled that, it was trying to match my Google search terms to stuff that was already out there on the internet, stuff that already existed that humans had created. And it was trying to figure out the best match. These are the hits, right? What chatbots are doing here, what ChatGPT is doing here is fundamentally different, because it's not just looking for something that already exists. It knows what lesson plans are because, again, it has thousands and thousands of them within its large language model, within its brain. It knows what PowerPoint slides are supposed to do, and it knows about the topic of second language acquisition. And so it creates this output. It generates this output by putting all of these things together. But this output is a novel thing that it's created, right? And so again, this is where when we're saying generative AI, that's the generative piece, and that's why this type of AI is really is kind of a very different sort of thing than how we've been maybe using it up till now. So I think, Dietra, that in a nutshell is kind of what we're talking about when we say ChatGPT, we say chatbots, generative AI. Again, and a lot of potential for us as educators. So I'll give you some specific examples later on, but I'll toss it back to you for now, since that's where we're starting from.
Thank you so much, Peter. And this is one of those incredible reasons why you're on this panel. And I'm so grateful we're recording this. So if any of you are on here thinking, oh my gosh, I need to have that information for my colleagues or my family members or whoever else, this recording will be available shortly after the webinar concludes, maybe a couple of weeks. So I just want to put that out there too. We are recording it. So if you were trying to take notes on all the great things Peter was saying, we will have a recording coming your way. So just thinking about the information Peter just shared with us, we can see how educators are really striving to try to think about the evolving demands of teaching and learning in the 21st century. And AI really could be positioned as a pivotal tool in doing that work. So now we're going to shift a little bit. And Rick, I'm going to ask you to help us think a little bit about how, given what we just learned about AI, how can AI be harnessed to enhance teaching, learning, and even help us with administrative tasks in ways that really enhance or support efficiency and productivity?
Thanks, Dietra, and thank you, Peter, for that great introduction. I'm actually going to build on some of the things that, Peter, that you mentioned. And so when I think about efficiency, it made me think about how we interact with these generative AI models. And so that led me to think about limitations of these models as a way to sort of introduce what I'm going to be talking a bit more about. And so some things that I think is important for you to know is that these models are they don't have common sense. They don't possess understanding. These are based on statistical models of what is most likely to happen next. Arzu, great to see you mentioned in the chat about any time that you input information, anytime something is free on the internet, you are the product. And so anytime that you input information, you put something in, it becomes part of its model. And so that has implications for privacy. So for example, putting in, you think, oh, maybe I'll check a student's work or something like that. That would probably not be okay to do. And so privacy is another concern. Bias, there's anytime there's a new model that comes out, people test it for different kinds of bias in terms of representation, and that it's and the different kinds of bias are well documented. But just to keep it to be aware that these do happen. I think we'll be getting more into more of these as our conversation continues. Over a generation. So lots of data as Peter mentioned. And so sometimes the responses we get can have a lot of text, and it's typically text. And if we have time, I'm going to give a non-text example. There's inconsistency. So the same prompt can yield different responses from a system. So that may help with creativity, but let's say we're guiding our students and we give them a suggested prompt. They may get a completely different answer than what you got when you put that prompt in. So that's something else that is important to note. Data dependency. Every generative AI model has sort of a date when their data ends. They have to say, they said, we're only going to take this chunk of data. And so ChatGPT 3.5, it's January 2022. GPT-4 is October 23rd. Gemini, which is Google's, has no date. Essentially, they're claiming that they are just taking information that is daily being generated on the internet and integrating that. Claude, which is another model, has August 2023. And if you're at OSU and you use Copilot, which is sort of our approved tool now, they say until some point in the year 2021. And so, again, these are important things to note. And I asked all of these AI models this question directly. And so these were the answers that they gave me. And then finally, this whole idea of prompt sensitivity. And so Peter talked about sort of how we interact with it determines what we get back from it. And so this leads to the idea of what's now been called like prompt engineering, is how can we essentially get what we want out of these systems by getting just the right prompts. And so so a few things that I'm sure a lot of you have experience with, but just in case you don't, of being clear and being specific. Specifying the format, like I'm writing a letter of recommendation, the context. This is for someone applying to be a teacher in a rural school. Use examples. You could even say, tell it the kinds of phrasing that you like to use. Tone, you could say professional. Sometimes you can tell it to give you its response in a step-by-step. Sometimes keywords may be helpful. Providing constraints, like if it's giving you too much text, keep it to 30 seconds or 150 words, and experiment and iterate. And so many of you submitted questions. Oh yeah, so again, just sort of a summary. You provide an audience, you give it direction and tone, you share a purpose, you include areas of focus, you include preferred length, you ask follow-up questions to refine and expand, and not too much information. And so many of you submitted questions around this idea of efficiency. And so I gave it the following quote: "You are an expert in AI and education, speaking at a panel for alumni at a college of education at a large research university. The audience ranged from the educational spectrum, from K-12 to higher ed. They are serious professionals looking for clear answers for with real-world examples. The following questions were submitted before the panel. Provide clear answers with specific examples. Answer each question individually. Each response should be no more than 150 words. I wanted to be able to fit it within a PowerPoint. And I'm not going to have time to go through all of the answers. And so you can go ahead and look through the answers that this was ChatGPT gave me. And I highlighted some specific things. And so you'll notice things like they did give specific examples. They pointed to specific tools. And so each one typically has an example. Microsoft Translator. They talk about cultural contextualization and the question about globally enhancing the learning experience and skills. So I'm going to go through these for the sake of time. and go to the fifth one. And so the fifth one was, how can AI assess and adapt to study learning styles and engagement levels without hindering their learning? And so it gave me this answer that talked about visual learners, interactive kinesthetic learners, maintaining flexibility. And I said, let's explore your answer to number 5. Your answer is very general. Could you tell me about a specific system that is currently available that can analyze student data from their interactions with educational content? And then it went through and it gave me, it talked about this system called Newton, which is owned by Wiley and Sons. And it told me about some of the ways that they do testing and they personalize and they do feedback. And then I wanted to know, like, well, how do you determine student strengths and weaknesses as well as their preferred learning? And it went even deeper into how it does that, and even talks about talks about proprietary algorithms, item response theory, Bayesian statistical methods. And so and then typically the answers will be strengths and weaknesses, and then often these tools will give you a summary of it all, challenges and considerations. And so again, if you've asked some of these questions, you can look through my presentation and see the answers. And then I asked, are there any open platforms that can do this, since this is proprietary? And it gave me a list: Moodle, Open edX, Torch, Sakai, and then it gave me some descriptions. So then I thought, well, I wonder if there's any criticisms of this Newton system. And so then I Googled Newton, criticisms, and I see this headline: Newton is gone, the larger threat remains. The digital snake oil didn't sell. Newton, once hailed as a mind-reading robo-tutor, is no more, having been sold for parts to John Wiley. Now, clearly, I believe the information that I was given was probably from the Wiley version, but it was a whole different picture that I would have never gotten had I just relied on the one AI. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to just point out, if you're interested in examples of prompts, particularly this last one that I give here, if any of you develop things like quizzes and want help with that, this gives you like a step-by-step instructions to how to develop a quiz using a method called undoing. And so you might find that to be an interesting way to go through an example that might match standards that you're trying to meet or specifics about your students. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Rick. I keep forgetting we have so many people on our panel tonight. That was such really helpful information, and seeing those examples were really helpful. And I think some of the concerns that we sometimes hear around students engaging with these chatbots or engaging with these platforms without any critical analysis of them, I think you just gave examples of why that critical analysis is so essential in the way that we talk about this with our students or with students in K-12. So, Casey, we are going to now pivot over to challenges and ethical concerns. And I think we have a really great platform to do that, given all the information that Peter and Rick have just shared with us. And so I'm really curious and really excited to hear how you kind of address that question. What ethical concerns and challenges should we be thinking about when we integrate AI into education? Thank you.
Thanks, Deetra. And yeah, I'll start by saying, ethics is a big topic. So I've pulled out just a few key areas to highlight in the few minutes that I have, but also just, thank you for being here today. And I'm happy to be here and with Peter and Rick to talk about this exciting about AI in general and what's going on in the future here. There are amazing tools, as you've heard from both Rick and Peter, but we also know with the amazing tools that there are some challenges and concerns in their adoption. So we'll spend this time, like I said, talking for a few minutes about challenges and ethical concerns. And all of what we've put together today is related to the questions that you've submitted when you registered. So I thought first we'd start with just a few key lessons that we learned here at OSU to kind of kick off and help set the stage a little bit. The first is security. So the job of these tools, as you've heard, is to comb for data and make connections and find patterns. So you might imagine that information that you add to the tool, even in prompts, is just like you adding it openly to the internet. It's not kept securely. And so you saw someone in chat mention that about updating a resume, removing those identifying pieces is really important. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And as I think it was Rick or maybe Peter mentioned that at OSU here, we've actually employed Microsoft Copilot as our approved tool, which allows for some data protection. So in thinking about that confidentiality, again, by their very nature, these systems are looking to understand you better as a user. So they're going to pick up on and even store details that you're adding. And so as a best practice, it's really a great idea to remove any identifiable details, like what's shown in the example here. I typically just put them in brackets. Whatever thing that I'm trying to remove that's identifiable, I put into a bracket. And then the result that comes back will have those brackets included, just as you would have included a name or an address. And it makes it easier for me to go back and replace that identifiable information again into the results that I'll use ultimately. So simply in the same way, you might be keeping in mind to remove student data. So using any examples of a situation or a concern you could add into a prompt, but not having actual identifiable information around the student. And then lastly is academic integrity. So Ohio State has established a university-wide policy stating that AI tools should only be used in an authorized way. Specifically, that the university states that students are not to use AI tools to complete course assignments unless the instructor has given explicit authorization. What I greatly appreciate about this policy is that it really leaves room for instructors to find ways to allow AI use in their courses if they wish. So with those lessons in mind, we can turn to some other challenges and concerns regarding AI. And a few that you've actually heard about today that are maybe more of the trending concerns, like AI hallucinations, where AI perceives patterns that don't actually exist and provides inaccurate outputs back to you based on those inaccuracies. Or deep fakes, like we saw the Pope and the puffy jacket, which are really just really convincing AI generated images and videos. Both of those challenges that we have with AI have implications of perpetuating the spread of misinformation. Well, another challenge that maybe isn't as trending, but is incredibly important to us, especially in the world of education, is bias in AI. So being built by humans, human bias is very much present in the generative AI tools. Also, AI is creating based on patterns and relationships that it learns and therefore perpetuate inaccuracies and stereotypes. And this can lead to the reinforcement of social inequities because AI systems mimic biases that exist in the real world. As such, algorithmic biases can lead to discrimination by reflecting existing biases in our society. For example, if an AI was trained on current news articles or books, AI would likely hold gender biases for specific careers. For example, if you're asking it to create a persona for a nurse, it's most likely to spit something back to you that is based on a woman, assuming that the nurse was female. Or, in the same way, if you ask it to create something around a firefighter, it will likely assume that that firefighter is male. Another bias to be aware of is actually in the use of AI tools that are intended to prevent cheating. So AI plagiarism checkers are out there and known, but they're also known to discriminate against English language learners. And facial recognition AI algorithms, like you might be using for online proctoring of exams, they're actually trained on data that includes more examples of white people's faces than other races. and are then known to discriminate by race by flagging individuals who don't meet that algorithm. Another challenge and concern comes from when and how we actually cite AI. So this was definitely something that we saw in the questions. As an emerging technology, I'll start by just saying that the standards and practices around our uses are and will continue to also emerge along with this technology. Basically, I've found that the standards are pretty fluid. So I kind of pause and ask myself, how do I answer this question around our citation standards? Well, I did what anyone would do in this day and age, and I asked ChatGPT. So I use this prompt, which is just in 100 words or less, identify when someone should cite generative AI. And here's what it gave me. Basically, it told me that when you directly quote, paraphrase, or use any ideas from AI, or when it significantly shapes your work, as well as when using data, images, and media generated by AI. Now, I'll tell you, I went and looked at a few different resources to find what are their viewpoints when it comes to when to cite for utilizing AI. And I got a few different results, but mostly it's when you're quoting, paraphrasing, and using that work directly. Some of that can seem pretty daunting. And I'll say to you, as someone who mostly uses AI as a thought partner, citing AI whenever I incorporate or think about an idea from its output can feel, as I said, kind of daunting. I'm typically using AI as what I call a jolt of caffeine, right? To give that creative juices, to get those creative juices flowing. And when I'm doing that, I'm not citing it in my email communications or workshop blurbs. However, when I'm directly quoting it, which is quite rare, or if the output that provided me is central to what I end up creating or sharing in the long run, then I'm definitely citing that. So when it comes to like official styles of citation, APA has an interim guidance for their 7th edition style guide that's available, and MLA has published guidance with a citing style specifically that says that they consider it a no author citation. But you may be asking yourself, what should you do? Well, I would recommend developing a personal standard, kind of like what I suggested that I'm doing for when you cite AI, but also to seek to develop a shared standard within your organization. Honestly, I feel like citing in particular is one of those things with AI that we are all figuring out, and we're going to do that together, and it will continue to emerge and grow. So when it comes to concerns with AI, misconduct is top of mind with educators. At first step, I would say in addressing this is to establish standards or policies for your organization. And then I'd recommend to build off that larger policy for instructors to develop course-specific policies for use of AI when students can or cannot use AI. And even I would suggest a policy reminder or statement for each specific assignment about AI use. This transparency can really set students and instructors up for success with clarity that they're all on the same page. One clear way to reduce misuse in AI education is to adapt assignments. Utilizing assignments that promote reflection and metacognition. For me, a good rule of thumb is if the only true correct answer can easily be Googled, then misconduct is possible through many means, including AI. So also consider transitioning to multimodal assignments. This great approach, that is a great approach, and using that instead of like long writing papers, having them develop a demonstration or a live presentation. And lastly, what do you do if you actually suspect misuse? So, it's a murky time, and I would say that my biggest recommendation would be to start by talking with the student if that's available. We know that those plagiarism checkers are biased and unreliable, and we know that we've seen an increase in academic misconduct cases. But again, we're all in this together, us and the learners, everyone's navigating this murky time together. So in my limited experience, an open conversation with the student can really help to shed light on any suspected misuse. I'd also recommend to get out there and start using AI if you haven't already. Your familiarity with the tool will actually help you in reviewing and identifying misuses of it. You'll learn that AI really has a language style that is somewhat distinctly its own, and it'll become easier for you to spot it with your increased familiarity with it. So lastly, quickly, I'll just say, with these challenges and concerns in mind, you may be wondering, what are some ways to move forward? First, I'd encourage to like I said, get to know those tools well. It's kind of like getting to know your enemy. If it's something that you're thinking is, a concern in the classroom, getting to know it will really help you in understanding it, but also in building better standards and policies that may be used in your area. Protect that data. Make sure that you're removing identifiable information, and knowing how to protect yourself sets you up also as a model and for those who are in the classroom and teaching others of how to kind of approach that similar concern. Edit and validate. So I have not seen a single AI output ever that I've used as is. Everything that I've seen needs some kind of editing to some degree. So, making sure that you're editing things, but also validating that the information you provided is actually accurate. Again, we're thinking back to those concerns about misinformation and making sure to validate through a variety of sources. And lastly, I think the best solution for educators when it comes to these concerns and challenges is to support student use in AI in a way that encourages critical thinking, promoting critical evaluation of the tool and its uses by using different practice applications that demonstrate data security concerns, prompts that open conversations around biases, exercise that evaluate the AI output for inaccuracies or gaps, and activities that turn AI suggestions into experiences and reflection. So basically using the tool to help us to think more critically about the use of the tool. I think that will really set our students up for success. So those are just a few ideas to get started. I know we're going to hear even more from Peter. And with that, Dietra, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Casey. Again, just another informative perspective about our challenges. And I love how you ended having us really think about what some of the solutions are to those. And Peter, I think building on where you started with us at the beginning and then Rick and Casey's questions, we can just see so much potential and also how learning experiences that might be formed by AI can require a lot of careful consideration. And so I really am excited to hear some of the ideas that you have around this last question. And that's really thinking about the role of AI in integrating it into assignments, teaching methodologies, curriculum design. What are some thoughts and some ideas and questions that we all should be thinking about when we attempt to or plan to or currently are integrating AI into our work?
Right. Thanks, Dietra. Yeah, so, and again, we fielded some questions from participants before, and so this is one that you had passed along to us, which I think is, it is the $64,000 question, right? How much can or should we begin to allow AI to transform how we teach and impact how students learn? Can we trust it? I think Casey and Rick did a good job of speaking to that, right? And the different trust issues that are raised. But yeah, let's talk about that first question of sort of how is AI going to transform the work that we do as educators? I'd start by saying that we, as teachers, we've always been adopting and adapting new technologies as they come out, right? We've always been trying to look for ways that technologies can help support our students' learning. So in a sense, this isn't something brand new, and we've had these kinds of moments. Like, for example, when students started walking into the classroom with digital calculators, and we were very worried that, like, okay, is this going to break math because now students aren't going to be learning, the basic mathematical thinking and learning about the basic functions because the calculator will be doing it for them, right? And so again, that caused math teachers to have to really rethink the way their pedagogical approaches. And similarly, I'm old enough. Well, as a teacher, I'm old enough that I started teaching with acetates on an overhead projector. But as a student, I'm also old enough that if we needed to look up something, I would go to the to my Funk and Wagnalls. That's how you would find stuff in the encyclopedia. And so, of course, when the web came and then Wikipedia, that really did change the way that we found information, right? And so, and as teachers, then we had to respond to that, right? And so, okay, we're worried about issues of like, okay, how do we help students use the internet and looking up information on the internet responsibly? How do we help them to understand what's reliable information and not, right? And so those same sorts of questions that we grappled with then is sort of thinking now about the 21st century skills that our students need. Again, I think this is another sort of watershed moment as we're thinking about AI as kind of this progression now of how do we help equip our students to to use these sorts of tools responsibly, and how do we as teachers use them as tools to really help not supplant the critical thinking that we want our students to do, but rather enriching it, right? And so I mentioned I'd done a seminar with some teachers last summer, and one of our participants is a teacher in Worthington. She'd surveyed her colleagues there about AI use, and the results were that basically the teachers, they love it for themselves as a tool, right? AI is great as a tool for me, but I hate the idea of my students using it because I'm worried about them cheating, right? And so I think we can, as teachers, we can relate to this, right? It's a great tool for me if it makes my job better, but I'm worried about what it's going to do when my students are using it, right? And so for me in higher education, at least, I pretty much have to assume at this point that all of my students are going to use it all the time, right? It's really pervasive. And so assuming that students are going to be using AI, again, what do I do with that? And I think, Casey, you helped us think towards that. Again, my students have been using these tools a lot throughout. I have a lot of international students. And so I was thought, okay, if you use a tool like Grammarly, which essentially fixes your grammar, that's great, right? That's a perfectly valid writing tool. Somebody pointed out now that Grammarly actually has now integrated these AI tools into it. So it's not just fixing spelling or fixing grammar. It can actually rewrite your paper according to different tone or different parameters that you put in there. So again, all of these tools now, it's sort of blurring. It's not just a grammar fixer. It's going much beyond that now, right? And so again, that sort of makes me think about okay, what does this mean? For how I have to think about this or rethink my own teaching approach. One aha moment for me was not just as a teacher, but as a parent as well. I have a middle school. My son is a middle schooler, and so last year, shortly after ChatGPT had come out, I went by his room and he's sitting there working on his homework, and I said, "Hey, buddy, what you working on?" He said, "Okay, I got this, this book report I got to do." And I said, "Well, how's it going?" "I haven't started writing yet." I was like, "Okay, so what did ChatGPT say?" And he's like, "What? Can I use that?" And I was like, "Well, probably not. I don't know. What does your teacher say? But maybe." I don't see where it starts as, again, as Casey mentioned, sort of as a, what did you call it? Like caffeine to get you thinking, as kind of a mentor text here. Let's see what it comes up with. So he puts this in. Sure enough, ChatGPT, it knows that book. It can very quickly spit out a perfectly good, but fairly generic book report on this book. And that's what Casey was saying. It's like, as a teacher, you sort of learn that this is like the voice of ChatGPT, right? You can kind of tell. And my son's like, "Oh, this is good." I'm like, "Yeah, it's good, but it doesn't sound at all like you," right? How would you make it sound more like you? Well, again, that's where the prompt engineering that Rick was talking about comes in. And you can get it to, in this case, act as a 7th grader and write the same, rewrite the whole thing, but from a 7th grader. When he saw this, he was like, "Oh, no, this sounds weird and silly." I was like, "What do you mean? Why does it?" He's like, "Oh my God, it's like, it's like it's overdone." I was like, "Okay, well, so like, how would we work with it then?" And so he actually started like basically playing around with the prompt engineering, right? To try to figure out what it was generating and really thinking about like, okay, does this, like, what is my voice and what is it producing? And I realized, again, as I'm a linguist, so I was realizing he was like really carefully analyzing all of the different word choices that ChatGPT was making as it was outputting, and trying to think about, how does that reflect my ideas and my voice, right? And so I came away from that experience kind of like, I guess, profoundly confused about whether or not this was cheating, because on the one hand, clearly he wasn't writing it; ChatGPT was writing it for him. But suddenly he was like engaged with this book report task that he had in a completely different way. And as I said, he was like really analyzing, again, the language choices that it was making, and thinking about it from sort of how he would do it. And so again, he became very engaged with the assignment, but in a completely different way. And along the way, we were playing with, prompt engineering and stuff like that, right? And so again, that really made me kind of rethink about how, what this means, what is the thinking process is going on, when is it cheating or not. So I've got some recommendations, I think 4 recommendations for you all as to think of as educators. One, and just kind of to reiterate what Casey said, be really clear about your expectations as a teacher, right? Your school or your district might have a policy, but as you saw, OSU's policy is fairly open. It really leaves it on the instructor to be clear with their students what the policy is and what my expectations for students are. And then also, as you mentioned, Casey, I think it's exactly right. Anticipating what ChatGPT would produce for the kinds of assignments that I give my students, right? And so if I have an assignment, I'm going to put that in into the chatbot to see what it's produced and get a sense of what it's going to be producing if the students do that, right? But then also, as you said, teaching responsible uses for the students, right? And one strategy that I endorse here is what's called an AI audit trail. And that's essentially, again, the student explaining to me very clearly how they were using the AI tool, including what prompts they were giving. And again, I think this is kind of like, can be used as, again, as a teachable moment, right? For thinking about what's being produced. And then finally, as we said, as teachers, we love this, right? We love this as a tool that we can use. And so again, thinking about how AI can be a pedagogical tool for student thinking and creation. So let me end with just a few examples of that. And so, again, we were playing around with this, and I think this is nice because it really allows you to use your creativity as well, right? And so, if I can imagine, if I'm teaching a high school class and we're learning about the Cuban Missile Crisis, well, hey, why don't we interview John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis and learn about what was going on, right? And I think that the kind of engagement that you see students doing when they approach the assignment in this way, and this is something that ChatGPT does really, really well. As Rick mentioned, you can use some prompt engineering techniques. One of this is called the persona pattern. Essentially, you're getting ChatGPT to do role playing with you, right? And having it do this role playing, if you want to understand, during the Civil War, why was Abraham Lincoln hesitant about signing the Emancipation Proclamation? Well, let's interview Abe. We don't even have to dig him up, right? And we can interview him and figure out what's going on. Again, for the students, that can be a really immersive, engaging experience. Some other examples, in my area, I work a lot with ESL teachers, right? English as a second language, who are working with English learners. And so another example here would be, there's now an AI tool called TWE, which particularly for language arts and world language teachers. TWE can pick a video on a given topic from YouTube. It will generate the subtitles that my English learners then can read to help them understand as they're listening and watching the video. They can be reading the subtitles. And then it will generate comprehension questions about the video based on the content, right? I thought, wow, this would have taken me hours and hours and hours to create a lesson like this. And it can do it, again, for a very particular topic, a particular interest that the student has. It can generate it like in a minute, right? So that's pretty amazing. Similarly, there's another tool called Diffit. And again, Diffit can generate content if I have if it's a social studies standard, for example, that I'm working from, it can generate content based on that. Or if I already have like a PDF text, I can put it into Diffit, and Diffit will essentially scaffold the text. So for us, for example, if I have an English learner who's in high school, maybe they're in 10th grade, I don't remember where the Civil War standards are. Let's say they're in 10th grade, but they're recently arrived, a newcomer student, right? And so their English proficiency level, even though they're in 10th grade, maybe their English proficiency level is only at 2nd grade. Well, okay, then I can ask Diffit, notice here, I can ask Diffit to rewrite the text and scaffold it to a 2nd grade level. It'll change the linguistic complexity and all that to make it understandable at that level. And you can even then flip it and ask it to translate that into Spanish so that the student can understand it in their native language. So again, this is an amazing tool. This would have again taken hours and hours to generate the informational text on a given topic, to set the grade level to scaffold for my English learners level. And as you can see here, it will then generate key vocabulary and multiple choice questions. So again, these are some of the sort of potential uses that we've explored as we're working with, for a particular population of students, or even tailoring it down to differentiating for the individual needs and interests of students. You can see that there really is a lot of potential here. So thanks, teacher. I'll leave it there. I know we might have some time for questions as well.
No, that was awesome, Peter. Love, my daughter is in the room right now. She's in 6th grade. So I think she definitely wants to have some conversations with me about how can we try this with some of my assignments. So thank you for sharing those really great examples. And Casey and Rick, thank you for already coming back on camera to join. We're going to take the next 10 minutes, everyone, to answer questions from the chat. And right now I see 2, and thank you so much for folks putting those in the chat. The first question, and I'm just going to invite anyone from the panel to weigh in, or all of you. So whichever these questions speak to your heart, go for it. The first question is, I worry when our graduate students put their data from research studies into generative models. Any suggestions about the best way to educate students about the ethics in getting help? And I'm assuming this last part means probably without giving too much data, but it ends with without giving. So any suggestions about the ethics of putting data into a GPT?
Casey, did you want to start since that was your topic? Or I have some thoughts as well, but if you want to. Okay. Yeah, I think that's, and I work with graduate students as well. And so I think the first thing to know is that at least for OSU, we can't ask students, and students shouldn't be putting data into any of these chatbots that require a click-through agreement, which is almost all of them. And again, that's why we now have Copilot, which is sort of the approved one. Even that, I think there's some, you mentioned, Casey, there's some ethical issues there. So I think there's a couple different ways we have to tackle this. I'm more than sure that the IRB is working on this right now. And I expect that IRB is our institutional review, like human subjects process that we as researchers will go through. And so I'm sure that that's going to be added as a part of that process, hopefully sooner rather than later. But also I think for us as advisors working with graduate students, we also need to understand this, right? As you said, Casey, very clearly, that when anytime we put data into this, into these chat, it's just now out there, right? It's as if I was posting it on my open Facebook account or something like that, right? It's now out there. And so again, all the same principles of confidentiality and anonymity and everything else, and all of the concerns that we have around student records that we as faculty have to abide by. The same thing goes for anything that you would put into these, into these chatbots. So that's the first thing. And I think, for us as we need to understand that as well, and now be integrating that as sort of part of in our methods training courses. That's got to be sort of ethics 101 now, as far as how we're approaching this in those courses.
Yeah. Rick, Casey,
Yeah.
any thoughts?
Rick, do you want to go ahead?
Just a quick thing. I think Peter covered the sort of the basic principles around IRB. The only additional one that came to mind is the idea of informed consent. And so when you're collecting the data, would you be comfortable telling your participants that you're going to be putting their information into a publicly available database, essentially? And so I think that would be another way to impress upon them, to the graduate students, about what happens when they put their data into an AI like that.
Yeah, and I think a small add-on is that as like an experiment or an exercise with the students, using maybe something similar that they are trying to find out, but changing that information to make it not associated with a specific person, and putting that into the system and seeing what it gives you back. Because when you get those outputs back, it will include those details. And it's kind of a teachable moment to learn that the minute it gives that back to me, that is now information that is available on the internet. So if you say, this person who lives at this address, how could I send this whatever to them? Now the internet knows that individual lives at that address. And so I think utilizing those outputs as teachable moments are also a good approach as well to consider, to kind of help students to see the concerns around that.
Those are some really great ideas. Thank you all for sharing that. And I hope people on the call, you're taking this information in, but also thinking about all the people that you were working with, your colleagues, your students, to start having these conversations, if not for the remainder of this academic year, definitely moving into fall. We have, I don't know if the 7 new messages are all questions. I'm looking at time. I'm going to ask one that's been up here for a while, and I think it's a pretty short answer, and then I'll try to get to some of the other ones that may have come in. And the question is, are there closed systems where you limit AI to creating answers from only the data you have provided, and that data is protected and not integrated?
I think that's kind of what we see with Copilot. So I'll share an example, and it's actually as a response to the first question as well. The other day, in preparing for a different AI presentation, was creating a fake prompt about, tell me how we can use social media in education. And I put that prompt into Copilot, and it provided me with a set of resources that were internal to my institution, internal to my organization, and a set of responses that were external. The internal ones were actually brought up a presentation that I had done years ago and had forgotten about. But basically, the system came back to me and said, here's a resource. And it was something that I had actually created years ago. Yeah, that's kind of, I think, yes, on the closed loop, it's internal, you can protect that data. And I know Peter mentioned there are some restrictions with that as well. I'll just mention Copilot is technically, they really only want us to use it for S1 and S2 data, public and internal, not for restricted data, even though it's our protected system. But yes, I think closed, and we know that it's getting other content that's available that we've created.
Thank you for that answer and the example. Again, lots of great information here. One, I think this might be our final question, and just know that if we don't get to all of the questions that everyone has posted, we will definitely use this to inform how we move forward at EHE. And also, some of us are on this call right now are on larger university AI committees, and we will take back these questions to those committees as well. So the last question is, are there any PD opportunities for faculty regarding AI use in courses at OSU? And I know the 3 of you, and I think Larry is on this call from Drake. So Larry, put some information in the chat as well if you're still with us. But if the 3 of you might want to chime in about opportunities that either you offer or that are part of the work that you're doing here at the university.
Well, I think we are in one right now. So this is kind of part of this process. And so I appreciate what CDLI is doing. I think Drake as well. I think that's, and again, I think as we go along more, yeah, and we try to figure out, okay, again, based on all the questions that you all are submitting to, kind of how can we maybe have some workshops that are, yeah, particularly directed to certain things. I've done a couple now out with the districts as well. And so, the kinds of questions, for example, that principals and vice principals are asking versus classroom teachers versus university instructors. I think that's the thing. I think as we sort of develop our own expertise as well and get more familiar with sort of how all of these things work. We're all learning as well, right? And it's such a fast moving. I mean, again, I did a workshop a couple months ago, and now it's too much later. I was like, oh geez, I have to like do my homework again because it just moves so fast, right? So yeah, I think that this is definitely, it's going to be an ongoing process for all of us, right? And so I think that you're right. We do need kind of I don't know, PD series or something to try to feel like we're keeping up with it all.
I just had something very quick to ask. And I would encourage folks to organize locally within your own fields, within your own disciplines. I think that some of these questions are very discipline field specific or school specific. And so the more we can talk with each other, I think, the more that we can learn and create communities around this thing that's changing every day. Just this past week, Google and ChatGPT, big huge announcements. Some of this, some has been referred to in the chat, but I think that would be another suggestion.
I love that suggestion, Rick, and I think it's a good way to end by saying, CDLI here at EHE will continue the AI working group in education that Casey and Rick co-lead. And we look forward to all of you joining us at those monthly sessions. And if you have suggestions or ideas for topics, please use the chat in the next 30 seconds to add those in there. I just want to take a second for everyone to just say thank you so much to Rick, Peter, and Casey for your expertise and your passion about this topic. And also just being a model about inquiry. Something I heard from each one of you is the questions that you have, what about, what if, what would it look like? Those are driving your engagement with these particular tools. And I think that that's a model for all of us to take up. So as a reminder, everyone, this recording will be on EHE's YouTube channel, and you can play it instead of Bridgerton. I don't know, every single night. Okay, Rick is voting no. But at any rate, we are so grateful that you all joined us this afternoon for this incredible conversation, and we look forward to engaging with you all again. Thank you so much and have a great day.